Okay, welcome back to the UX module. Today, this short video will cover what is UX. It is not an exhaustive view, it is a very thin slice of what UX might be. And the idea is that you can now go off and start to kind of investigate what you think UX is based on this. So what we have is this question. What is user experience? So we know that people interact with technology in various different ways. We know that technology exists in various different forms. But what is that user experience? So if we take this definition from the Nielsen-Norman group, it says user experience encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. So that's really important because we're covering products. So I have a pen, right? I have a user experience with this pen. I equally have a user experience with this phone. One is technical, digital, one is simply a physical object. But user experience still encompasses both of those things. Obviously, we're interested in the tech, but the user experience I have for this phone, I've got a screen, I've got a UI, but it's more than the UI. It's all of my interactions with Apple. It's the fact that it contains various services, as well as the physical makeup of both the device and the content that's on it. So it's a very complicated thing to start unpacking. So let's have a look at how we might do that. This is a diagram by someone called Jesse James Garrett, and it's specifically related to the web. But I think it holds true much more widely than that. So the idea is that if you're creating an experience, that experience has levels. So we start at the very bottom of this diagram with creating just abstract concepts. We've got a strategy. What do we want to get out of that site? And we can replace site with device, application, system, whatever it is. What do people actually want? There's no point in us creating something if it's no use, if it doesn't fit into any kind of company or user strategy. Once we have that strategy, we can start to scope that into requirements and figure out what the features would be. From there, we can start to give it structure. So how will the pieces of the site fit together? And that might be information architecture, it might be simply looking at different sections, it might be a task analysis. If I'm going through sending a text message, what are the steps I have to go through? And how will those parts behave and lead me on to the next one? And at this point, I don't care about the UI, I don't care about what it looks like. I'm just trying to give my kind of abstract idea some kind of structural resemblance. From that structure, I then move into this skeleton element, and this is what we'll soon know as wireframes. So very, very rough ideas of what that thing, application, device, whatever, what that product or thing looks like and what components are on it. So will there be a video? Will there be a heading? Will there be buttons? Will there be a form? We don't really mind at this point what the form looks like. We just want to know that there is a form. And then finally you have the surface layer, which is your look and feel. That's going to bring in the UI elements. So what I hope is really clear here is that UI doesn't come in until the end. There's a whole bunch of other stuff to do with what do we need, how do people behave, how can we put everything together in terms of overall structure and format that comes way before the surface element gets there. So when we talk about UX versus UI, UI is the jam on the top. UI is the thing that makes everything underneath it make sense. UI is the window through which people look at all of the user experience, research, and development that's gone into a product. But it's more than just, content and information architecture. We're probably having to consider what platform people are using it on, because we want some functionality that is cross-platform or platform-specific. There may be limitations on a platform, which depend on how we create something. We need to think about usability and accessibility. Now, usability is how easy something is to use. Accessibility is whether I can use it at all. So if I'm someone who's blind, can I still use the application? If I'm someone with a physical disability, can I still use the application? Content is important, especially if I'm something like a social media, I am a news application. What sort of content do I need? How do I get it out to people? How do I advertise it? Do I have internal writing styles, internal writing guides that I can use to make sure that the information presents itself well? But before we all go out looking for good design, the caution here is that good design is really difficult to see. Because if good design fits what we want so well, that design is invisible. So all through your learning in HCI and user experience, you probably see many, many examples of poor design. And that's because poor design stands out. Poor design is obviously poor. But if you try to explain to something why this particular application works, that can be a difficult thing to do. So although I will comment on lots of poor design, it's not that I'm being negative, it's just that it exists. If you want to read a bit more, you can read this book, which is The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. And the background is that Don came to the UK, realised that there were a whole bunch of things this is like the 80s, I think, that there were a whole bunch of things that kind of didn't make sense to him because he had spent his life in America. Light switches were upside down. Doors kind of didn't work in the way that he expected them to. So this is all about how things can have all the features they need but not be very usable. So how do you make sure you design things for people and with people? So although it's an old book, everything in it holds true today, and although it perhaps focuses on very early tech examples, the physical examples you can absolutely translate. I mean, you take a door. Doors exist in virtual reality, right? That's technically a technical digital door, whatever. But go and read the book. It's absolutely a valuable thing to do. It's not an expensive book either, but the library has plenty copies in stock. This is my standard definition when people start getting kind of into the UI type thing. And we have a tomato ketchup bottle. It's very hard to see, but there is a small 57 just here on the bottle. And the idea is that if you turn it upside down and you hit that 57, the tomato ketchup comes out easily. If not, you're totally like kind of, banging the ketchup against the table and how do I get the ketchup out? So Heinz kind of realised this and they now created these squeezy bottles of tomato ketchup, which have much better affordance. It's obviously something I can squeeze. They have much better use in terms of I know exactly where it's coming out of. I can direct the tomato ketchup. I've got much more control over how much I have. And so while it might not be your iconic bottle, it's probably much more useful because they've considered everything and not just what it looks like. Another example from perhaps a baby point of view is you have to see things as your user sees them. So these adults are standing next to this mobile musical thing. Oh, I love it. It's wonderful. Look at all the cool animals. But the user here, or your primary user, your primary stakeholder is this kid that's lying in the cot in the crib. And it's just looking up and seeing a bunch of animal bums, which is probably... They probably don't know very much about it because they're a baby, but it's also a bit strange. So always looking at things from your user point of view is kind of the big bit of advice to take from that. And then I want you to go and form your own opinion. I want you to go and Google. I want you to go and search what is user experience. Find out for yourself. Make your own decision. What do you think it is? And I think we'll have a discussion in Teams about that as the week progresses. And the other thing I want you to do is go and search for UX jobs. So not all of you will want to go and work in UX. That's fine. Phone going off. But go and have a look and see what sort of jobs are out there, and that's going to give you a sense of what user experience is. So you'll see UX or UI designer. Again, note that difference between UX and UI. There might be content designer, so that's about kind of writing content, creating images, that sort of stuff. A writer, probably specifically related to text, but not always. The one that I think is most interesting here is a UX researcher. So a UX researcher will go out and research users, research situations, research contexts, and then present that work. You may also research whether a system is any good. So you might be doing like A/B testing, you might be looking at website analytics, whatever. It's a very data-driven field, and an analyst is something similar. An analyst might not create the experiment or create the study, the survey, but an analyst will look at the results. A consultant typically will be someone who works for a UX company who take on clients from varied backgrounds or varied sectors. So Bunnyfoot, for example, is a large UX consultancy based in the north of England. And what they will do is you can go to them and say, we need someone to design an app. We have a problem with our app. We need someone to fix it. And you can be from any sector, finance, oil and gas, a shop, an online service, a life coach, whatever it is you want to be. And they'll look at it. So again, that's a difference between working for a UX company or being the UX person within a company. So you might work for Tesco Bank. So all you're going to do is finance. Whereas on a consultancy, you get a broad range. So it depends what the specialisation is. UX developer is here as a word of warning. If you see a job that says UX developer, what they really want is a front-end developer who can create CSS and JavaScript. It's typically not very much to do with the design or creation of stuff other than taking someone else's idea and building it. But go and have a look for yourself, see the different variations and see how that plugs into what your initial idea of UX is. So that sums up the section on what is UX. Have fun doing your research and we will chat some more about it in Teams separately.